Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another video. I'm Cassandra from CassandraTyndall.com, and today I've got a bit of a different video for you. Over the weekend, I delivered a webinar about aversion for the Astrology Niagara group. So it reminded me that I do have that webinar on my website. I've also given the Aversion webinar to a tutor's Nightlight Astrology speaker series, I think maybe early in 2021. By far, it has been my most popular and well-received material. When I discovered it, really dived into aversion. I was aware of the concept for quite some time, but I really dived into it probably around 2015, 16, and it totally transformed the way that I work with charts. So generally speaking, when we're thinking about some of maybe the challenges or the difficulties that we would try and extract from a birth chart, we generally look to things like squares or oppositions, maybe a planet with a lack of either accidental or essential dignity. But when I'm working with aversion, I am looking for those house topics in our birth chart where the ruling planet of that said topic does not make a Ptolemaic aspect to that house. So it's not necessarily one planet in aversion or not making an aspect to another planet. Is what happens if, when we look at traditional astrology, which is a little bit different, is let's just say it's your second house and that ruling planet, for example, might be Mars, which might indicate you are, assertive, confident to tackle challenges or go out and earn the cash. But if that planet, which would be Mars in that instance, can't see that second house, there's going to be some challenges in trying to really make it rain, so to speak. So this is how I work with aversion. It has, as I said, transformed the way I approach charts. It's been so revelatory for people, because ultimately the study of astrology is the study of light. So there is also just as much to say about the things that lack light as there is to the things that have lots of light. So I want to share 15 minutes of this webinar with you, going through some of the aspect theory and some of touching on the philosophy of the idea of aversion. And because of the nature, it's very in-depth, it's very personal. At the end of the webinar, there's also loads of client examples of how we have looked at some of the difficult parts in a birth chart. And then we also do, which is my favorite thing, some layering of techniques. So while, yes, there may be some challenges in the birth chart as per aversion, it doesn't have to be that way forever. So we will get windows of opportunity throughout our lives where this difficulty may be front and center, and how we can overcome that. So that might be through secondary progressions, Fidaria cycles, transits, and the like. So I want to share a little bit of this particular webinar with you. If you would like to get the entire webinar, which I don't know, maybe like 2 hours, including Q&A, up on my website. I do have the version of this particular webinar that I did for a tutor and Nightlight Astrology available. So you just go to my website, click on the Learn Astrology tab, and you will see somewhere there is the aversion astrology's hidden aspect. That's where it is. Yes, it was. I thought it was hidden there for a moment on my page. So you can go over there, download the webinar, and watch it instantly. So there's a selection of other topics there as well, and a lot more that will be uploaded to my website really soon. If you're really keen to dive into astrology and learn more about it with me, I would love to have you in my latest astrology cohort, which begins on August 4 Australian time. And we're going to do about an 8 to 9 month deep dive in everything about houses, planets, signs, aspects in the first semester. And then the second semester, which will begin around December, it will be lunar phases, solar phases, fixed stars, and chart analysis. So my intention with the not the golden circle, there's also that too, but with the Contemporary Astrology Program is not just to teach you astrology, but teach you how to do it. So there's a lot of people out there that know a fair bit about astrology, but it's the ability to be able to do it is going to be your point of difference. And that's what I really hope to impart in this particular program. All of it is also available via an app, so it makes it very easy and convenient when life gets in the way a little bit too. So all of those details, of course, are on the courses page. And if you've got any questions, if you think it's the right course for you, where should I start? I know a bit about astrology already. Do I need to start at the beginning? Please feel free to send me an email. You can do that via the contact tab on my website as well. So that kind of wraps it up for this Monday morning. It is Monday here in Australia. So I do hope that this snippet of my webinar helps to kind of get you thinking a little bit differently about the parts of the chart that don't instantly pop out. And of course, if you'd like to download the whole webinar and get all the insights and the information, that is available for you as well. So until next time, everybody, I hope you have a great week. It's the new moon in Leo, and hopefully it helps maybe reignite your fire a little bit. If you'd like to find out more details about the astrology in advance each month, there is the golden circle there as well. So I look forward to catching you in the next video. Periods where maybe we had a teacher that wasn't so supportive, or people in the classroom that, were like this guy. So actually, when I went through these images this afternoon, I was thinking, yeah, this guy's a little bit like Mars in 2021, sort of agitating and amplifying things that spelled trouble. So if you were like me at school, you probably were this guy. You took full advantage of when the teachers turned their back, either to pass a note, to chat to the person next to you, swing on your chair, or just simply cause a little bit of mischief because you can. So in contradiction to the previous image, you too probably had a particular classroom setting where you experienced, both of these types of scenarios. The teacher may not have had like sufficient class control. Maybe they didn't deliver the content in a way that engaged you or the other students, and generally didn't have a good handle on things. So in this case, you probably had to work a lot harder to get those grades you needed, or the grades that you wanted. So when these types of situations occur in our life, whether we use the analogy of school, whether we use our birth charts, these situations will tend to give us the experience of mischief or strife or misbehavior, and the general tone of things will tend to head south pretty quickly. So with the general sense of disarray in the classroom, we do lose the things or the situation that brings us a sense of, order or control or structure or a certain level of predictability that all lead us to being able to accomplish something. So when we feel this kind of shaky ground, or when things don't feel clear, it can make us feel perhaps a little bit fearful. Am I doing this right? What if I make a mistake? It can create blockages or obstacles, or even overwhelm, or some type of maybe low level anxiety within us. We might experience it as a lack of confidence in a particular subject or area of life, in either of ourselves, or with the teacher, or with a career path, with a relationship, and those kind of things, or all of the above. So we can start to begin to doubt our abilities with something, maybe doubt the ability of the teacher. And over time, this can often show up as like a lack of trust. We may also begin to feel a little bit of angst or internalize, any worries or concerns that we might have in a situation. For others, complacency might even become part of the picture. So here in Australia, we would just say, "Oh, she'll be right, mate," which kind of roughly translates to, "Don't worry about it, everything will be okay." That sort of sweeping under the carpet or a denial or oblivion to the problem is also possible as well, when we don't have that ability to see it or connect to it. On the other hand, hypervigilance is also another outcome when we do have that feeling of loss or lack of control or direction or visibility with something. Again, anxiety may bubble up to the surface in that like inability to relax, enjoy, or even make choices that can really inhibit our experience of a particular life concept that aversion speaks to. So before we actually take a deeper dive into aversion, it's a really good idea to recap aspects and why they're important and what they sort of mean loosely, because obviously many of you probably already know that. But they really are the nuts and bolts of the work that we do as astrologers, whether it's natal astrology, whether it's horary, whether it's looking at transits or doing predictive work. So aspects do provide us with a deeper meaning and a level of interpretation to what planets symbolize. So aspects, regardless of what sign they occur in, can really completely change the energy or the expression of any said planet. So for instance, if you look at the moon, and if somebody or a chart has moon conjoined Pluto, that's regardless of the sign, it's going to instantly bring up certain connotations of what that might mean. It will be experienced to the person in a very similar way. And it will instantly suggest themes of perhaps, privacy, loyalty, and trust, for example. The converse can be true with Moon Jupiter, for instance. Regardless of that sign, we're going to start to think, oh, well, there's a certain level of benevolence there, or generosity, or the amplification of themes of material gain or accumulation, or even like nurturing, comfort, and care. So when a planet forms a connection to another planet via an aspect, it gives us more information into the way that planet will behave or express itself. Therefore, it really simplifies and makes our natal or predictive work a whole lot more accurate. So to apply perhaps maybe more of a modern overlay or evolutionary approach to our astrology and to the chart, we could look at these planetary aspects or connections, as a part of that soul map or the map of the psyche, which is often how our birth charts are referred to. And so if that is what the birth chart, can potentially symbolize, then what connections or kind of conversations are taking place within that birth chart, or lack thereof as well, of course, which is also important because that's what we're looking at today. So aspects. So I'll just read you a quick quote here from Manilius, where he explains, "Nor is it enough to know the special shapes of the signs and the individual ordinances of which the stars impose on men at their birth. They also affect our destinies through their agreements with each other, for they rejoice in alliances and cooperate with one another to their natures and their locations." So there is an emphasis on agreements, so those aspects that are formed with the stars. So it's these connections or aspects, conversations, lines of sight, however you want to look at it, within the birth chart really do give us so much more to work with. So while seen as challenging aspects, the squares and oppositions, at least they give us something to work with. We can manage or deal with or work through, integrate, whatever you want to, use, you can work with things that you can see, with the square and opposition. It's a bit like an alcoholic, for example, saying, hey, I have a problem. I've got this square here, aka alcohol. It's hard and I don't like it, but at least I'm aware of it. When there's awareness, you can work with that energy. With aversion, however, it's like when that alcoholic is in total denial. Maybe they know that things aren't quite great or good, but if you can't deal with what you can't admit or you don't have awareness around or what you can't see. So in some ways, when we look at these planetary aspects as conversations, when we say in the modern, in the modern times, and a lot of what's kind of out there in the zeitgeist right now, in the same way that someone's silence can speak volumes, a lack of connection in the birth chart can also speak volumes, not just the aspects that are obvious to us. So back to the idea of a chart being a map or a soul or an expression of our psyche. So what happens when a planet, or aka teacher, as exampled in those earlier images, what happens if they're not listening or they're not involved or they're not on task? What is the nature of that connection or conversation that's happening? So when people come to this topic from a more modern astrological leaning, they'll often ask me, oh, I've got a quincunx between like my Venus and Pluto, or I have a quincunx to Sun and Uranus. And of course, there's always an outer planet in that question. And coming from a traditional standpoint, I don't work with aversions in that context, not saying that they don't have application, but my mind just instantly thinks, okay, well, what do those planets rule? So firstly, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto don't rule anything using traditional models. So that casts those out. So we're like, well, what does Venus, quincunx or aspecting anything really mean if it's not grounded down or applied to terra firma, like the houses? How does that planet influence a certain life topic? So when we start to work with planets as rulers of our life topics, or aka house rulers, rather than archetypes, we can truly get to that nitty-gritty of what aversion can bring to your astrological toolkit, and why I think they're so fascinating and wonderful. But before we dig deeper into that, let's revise aspects. So obviously I think I've covered that. What if they make no agreements? What if the teacher's not listening and back's turned? Okie dokes. So if you were with us in the pre-chat, before the class was recorded, we sort of briefly touched on something that I even put in my notes to discuss with you today. So aspects. So imagine it's 2019 again, back in the day, way back when we could attend in-person astrology conferences or a party or anything like that. Seems like another world now. So, to use the analogy of an astrology conference, because it's something that, many of us will probably be more familiar with. So if we experience a conjunction at an astrology conference, these two people, maybe more, would be fairly inseparable. So they might be in a relationship or lovers, or they could be really good friends. But we all know those people who, if you want to know where the other one is, you just find that person and they will know. The sextile might be someone that you meet at a conference. For example, a fellow student of Nightlight astrology, for example, and you might be really excited to meet this fellow student, but you meet in real life and you're like, I don't really have anything in common with that person apart from having the same astrology teacher.
The square, you know, this could show up as the traditional astrologers and the evolutionary astrologers, where we share the same modality or overall goal, which is astrology, but the methods that we use are different. The trine, so these people are the ones that you meet up at the bar and you realize, oh my God, it's already 3 a.m. and it feels like you've only talked to them for 5 minutes. So those are always the exciting ones. And then the opposition. So, you know, this might show up as someone who's, you know, your polar opposite in terms of your astrological approach, but you might gain a really like healthy respect or admiration or appreciation for. No aspect. So even at the larger conferences, like UAC, which back in 2018 was just crazy, you may not even get the opportunity to cross paths or lay eyes on another astrologer that you're really hoping to meet or connect with or catch up with. Just because the connection doesn't happen. You know, only got to very briefly meet a tutor at UAC in 2018 because we just happened to catch the same lift. I was like, oh, hi. And then that was it. I didn't have another sighting of him again. So, you know, this is the way that aspects work. It's connections. It's being able to visualize or work with something either in a harmonious or maybe a little bit more of a challenging way, but it's something. And that's the whole point. When we have an aversion, there's just nothing there to work with. And that is when we look at what aspects are, they are signs that share affinity with each other. And if you can't see them, then you can't share that affinity. So the etymology of aversion. So aversion is a term of phrase that I personally don't seem to really hear much nowadays. I mean, that might be different in other parts of the globe, but I just never really hear people say that. But when I was a kid, I used to hear it all the time through my dad. And he would be like, Cass, have you got some kind of aversion to doing XYZ, you know, some chore I was meant to do? So I always had an awareness of the context of the word, but it was really probably only been in the last handful of years. I really started to think, okay, like we're using this in astrology and I get the astrological implication. I remember what my dad said, but what does it kind of really mean? And Ptolemy described aversion as being estranged or alienated. So, thanks to Wikipedia, in the 16th century, they used to just talk about the term of aversion as being turned away in mind, feeling a dislike or unwillingness. The mid 17th century was a mental attitude of repugnance or opposition. Repugnance is such a strong word. Again, another one that I don't hear very often these days. Old French was hostile or antagonistic. In Latin, there was a turn or turned back. And a synonym would be a disinclination or a reluctance. So either way, which way we want to look at this term, it doesn't really, there's no real association here around situations that are positive or supportive or suggestive of useful outcomes. So when we look at aspects, the ancients used to believe that the planets cast rays that we interact with. So this can be like the planet emits some kind of ray that connects to our eye, we can see it, or our eyes emit something that embodies or brings to life an object in front of us. So a body that is seen does one of two things. It either sends something of itself to us and thereby gives us an indication of its particular character, or if it does not itself send something, it waits for some sensory power to come to it from us. So either way, the point here is being about visibility. So the visibility, the line of sight, which is really like levels of light, is such a huge part of what we do as astrologers. We're really kind of examining the light levels in planetary phases, and then of course from this aspect position too. So if we've got 7 visible planets to work with, and each of those planets cast a ray of light, we've got 7 planets and 12 signs. So naturally, each planet can only cast rays out to 7 signs and misses 4. So it's this level of light, or lack thereof, which is the essence of what astrology is about, and what I really do think looking at aversion is about too. Okie doke. So